What's going on, everyday people, and welcome to Chadeveryday. Today I'm going to give you guys a crash course in Adobe Lightroom, the very startup from the beginning when you first get the thing until you get to exporting some photographs. And I'm going to do this in under 15 minutes. I don't know why I do this to myself, but let's go ahead and get into today's tutorial. Okay, so let's see if I can teach you guys a crash course of Lightroom in 15 minutes or less. This is going to be a test for myself, so let's see what we could do. But before we get into Lightroom, I want to show you something really quickly. So Lightroom is more than just a photo editor like Adobe Photoshop. Lightroom can also be a very nice file management system, and that's kind of how I use it on top of it being a photo editor. So let me show you what I'm talking about. I actually use an external hard drive to store all my files. Really, only the things that I'm either working on or, as you can see here, getting ready to upload to YouTube are all that stays on my desktop or in my downloads folders. So I'm going to click into my external drive here, and I'm going to go to my photography folder. This is where I include all of my images I've ever shot, and the recent year stays here, my Lightroom master file folder stays here, and then all of my archived work stays here. So within each of these corresponding years is going to be my Lightroom catalogs and my folders, as well as all the photos that I've shot prior to this year. That's just how I like to organize my file. So when you first open up Lightroom, you'll be prompted with something like this. Now, of course, I already have a catalog here, so we're going to create a brand new catalog, and we're going to call this LR Tutorial. And we're going to save this in the same folder management system that we put our photos, and like I showed you a minute ago, my different layers, that's where I'm going to save it. So we're going to click create, and it's going to create us a brand new Lightroom catalog to use. So let's just let that load up. And we're going to start, make sure you're starting in the library tab, because I want to show you guys now how to import the photos, how to rate and rank your photos, and also how to create a collection to easier organize and better to be able to edit your photos. So let's go up to File, and we're going to go to Import Photos and Video. And then you're just going to select your source. So for me, I actually use my Nerve Center, which is my external hard drive. I'm going to go to Photography. I'm going to go to Archived for this tutorial, and we're going to go to this folder right here. It's from a music festival that I photographed a few years ago. Now at the top, there's some options of how you can move those into Lightroom. I'm not going to go into huge detail here, but what I like to do is add. So it adds the photos to the catalog without moving them from the folder that they were in. That's just my preferred method to do things. Now you can see here there's 205 total photos. If you do not want to import all of these photos, all you have to do is either uncheck all and select the ones you want to import, or you can unselect the ones that you do not want to import. But I like to import them all, so we're going to go ahead and import that. And then from Lightroom, I will choose which files I want to keep, which ones I want to get rid of, and then I will also label them. Now you're going to notice in my Lightroom files here, there are some that's already labeled either blue or green. Now how you do that and why you do that is as follows. So I like to label photos that I know I'm going to use as green, and then photos that I may not use as red. So let's click on number 9 right here, and I'm going to hit number 6 on my keyboard, and that's going to change this color code to red. And then, you know, the photos that I like, again, that's green, and you get that by hitting 8 on the keyboard. So that's going to color code that as green. So let's go ahead and do this real quick. Let's say this photo I don't like, so I'm going to go ahead and label that as red by hitting number 6. I don't like, let's see, this photo, so I'm going to make that red. I don't like this photo, so that's going to change the red. And I don't like this photo, so that's going to change to red. Okay, now the reason we do that is so that we can go down here to our filter menu, and we're going to go to filters on, and then see there's stars, there's flags, and there's also color codes. Well, let's click on the red color code here, and then up here at the top, we're going to hit red again. Now it's going to bring up all the red images, all the images that we decided to get rid of out of our import. So what we're going to do is hold in Command A to select all those images, hit backspace on your keyboard. Now you're prompted with an option to delete these files from the catalog it within Lightroom, or you can actually delete them from the disk as well. Well, I recommend not deleting these from the disk because you may want these files later. You may go back down the road and decide these are really good files. So all I'm going to do is hit remove. And all that's going to do is just remove those files from Lightroom, but it's going to keep them on my hard drive. Okay, so now with no filters selected, we have the remaining photos, and you'll see that we got rid of 5 photos, so now we're down to 200. But what we want to do now is take the photos that we like the best, the ones that we really truly want to edit, which are the green ones. So let's select our green label here. I'm going to hit Command A, and then on these photos, I'm going to create a new collection. So with the collections, you're just going to hit this plus sign, and we're going to create a collection, and we're going to do this music_festival _use. And then this allows us to know that these are the images that we want to use, but yet we still do have the original images here in case we want to go back to those to edit later. So let's click on our music festival collection. That goes down to the 57 images that we chose. We're going to hit Command D to deselect. And now what we're going to do is move our thumbnail slider up a little bit larger so we can go through and choose which photo we want to start editing first. So let's click on the photo we want to edit, and then let's go to the Develop tab. I think this one may be a little bit better, so let's see what we can work with on this one. So what we got over here on the left-hand side, we have our navigator. Now we have a small thumbnail over here of the overall image, and you can use that to fill. You can do a 1:1, a 3:1, or you can actually fit in your main screen. Then you have your presets, snapshots, history, and all your different collections. Now we're not going to worry about that side of the screen today. We're actually just worried about this editing side right over here. So what I want you to do is pay attention to this white balance. If your white balance comes up like mine, it's because you have imported a JPEG image and not a RAW file. Now if you would have shot this in RAW and this would not have been an edited image, you would have various white balance options over here on the side to choose from. That's why it's important to shoot and edit in RAW so you don't lose any of your values, but you keep as much information with the image as you possibly can. You don't have to worry about compression and all that stuff. But for the sake of today's tutorial, let's see what you would do if this happens to you. So when you don't have anything to click on to actually change your white balance modes here, what you would do is use this slider. So if you pull it to the right, it's going to make the image warmer. If you pull it to the left, it's going to make the image cooler. If you double click on the particular slider that you're dealing with, that's going to reset all the values back to 0, and the same goes with the tint. Okay, so if you have an issue with using the sliders, you can also use the eyedropper. So you want to select an area that is completely white and just click it, and that's going to get you a neutral white balance set. So now that we have our white balance set, let's go play around with some other sliders and kind of see how we can edit this image. So by looking at the histogram, it looks really nice. We have a great histogram that's got some detail over here in the shadows, got some sections over here in the highlights, and a lot of nice mid-tone areas. But if you were to grab this histogram, you can actually pull this to edit your exposure. And you can see that the exposure slider is actually moving by sliding this histogram. Now me, I like my images to be a little bit more exposed, so we're going to pull this up a little bit. And you can see the exposure slider is now a plus 0.24. But I feel like the highlight detail could come down a little bit so we can see these clouds a little better, and this background's not so bright that it's taking away from the subjects. So let's pull our highlights down and try to get some of that detail back. You can see up in the clouds, watching the clouds as I'm sliding this slider, that poof, we got some more detail back. And maybe we could pull our histogram back just a tiny bit. Okay, so now what we want to do is deal with the shadows. So you can see the shadow area here, and we're going to pull that up just slightly because we're going to add in some contrast. Now when we add in the contrast, what it's going to do is make our darks a little bit darker and our whites a little bit whiter. So now that we got a nice little bit of contrast, we've got our highlights played with, our shadows played with, we're going to go with our whites, and that's the overall, it's kind of like the brightness of the image of the whites, and we're going to tone that down just a little bit. And our blacks, I think I'm actually going to pull those up just slightly. And always be sure you're paying attention to your histogram because it's going to tell you a lot of detail about your image. Now clarity is a section where it kind of adds a little bit of sharpness and a little bit more detail. But I notice a lot of photographers will do too much. Like this, for example, is way too much clarity. And a lot of photographers feel like that this kind of clarity adds like that HDR look. That is not how you do HDR. Never use this much clarity. So if you're going to use clarity, I recommend doing something around 8. It's a happy medium between 5 and 10, which I think is a great zone to be able to add that in. Now with vibrance and saturation, again, if you want your colors to pop a little bit more, maybe add just a little bit of vibrance. Saturation, I try to stay away from adding too much of that. If I am going to add it, it's usually between 2 and 4. And that's pretty much it for that part of the slider section. So next we're going to go down to the tonal curve, and this is where you do your basic S curves. So what I like to do is create 3 little dots, 1, 2, and 3. And that's for your shadows, your midtones, and your highlights. And then I like to pull my shadows down just slightly a little bit this way, pull my highlights up just a little bit that way. And it gives you just a basic little S curve, which kind of gives you a little bit more contrast to your image, makes it pop just a little more. And that's pretty much all we're going to do with the tonal curve today. Again, if you guys want to get a little bit deeper into the details of Lightroom, follow my channels, go ahead and subscribe, because I'm going to be going into more detail on a lot of this stuff in future videos. So be sure to stick around for that. We're not going to talk about split toning today, but split toning can be cool, especially when you're getting into that creative editing. So we're going to go ahead and skip that section. Now, detail is an important area. So this is where we do our sharpening. You can also do some noise reduction if you have nighttime images and try to get rid of some of that noise if you've shot with higher ISOs. But for sharpening, what you want to do is click this little anchor point here and just choose an area where you might want to do some sharpening. So let's go to this young lady's mouth right here. And we're going to pull our sharpening up to about 50%. Now what that's going to do is sharpen the image, because if you shot in RAW, you'll know that there is no sharpening added, whereas my image is a JPEG right now, there's already sharpening. But to make sure you determine where your sharpening goes, you go down to masking, and if you hold down the Alt key while you drag across, you can actually see the mask of where the sharpening is going to be. So that way, not everything in the image is totally sharpened. So let's go ahead and increase this mask up and then release, and there we go. So now we have a nice sharpened image. The colors are popping, it's very vibrant. This is a good overall edit. So let's scroll on down here. The last thing I like to do is add a profile correction, and all that's going to do is pull up the information from the camera and the lens you use to add an overall adjustment to that. And then you want to stay away from effects. We don't even want to get into that today. And then camera calibration, you can leave where it's at. So now at this point, you have a very nicely edited image, and you're ready to export. You're ready to share this to social media. You're ready to upload to your website, or you're ready to print. So how do you do that? First of all, you want to go to File, and you want to go to Export. So at this point, you get to choose your export location. So if you just want to send it straight to your desktop, that's fine. But we're going to put this in a folder called Lightroom Tutorial. Now, if we're exporting this for web, here are the settings that I use. Don't worry about file naming or video or anything like that. Go straight to File Settings. We want this to be a JPEG. I do sRGB. And then the quality, I like to set about 70%. And then just kind of leave it right there. And then for image sizing, I just put it at a resolution of 72 pixels per inch. And then the rest of this stuff you can leave however you want. If you want to add a watermark, you can do that. All you got to do is click on watermark, click edit watermarks, and then it's actually going to bring up the dialog for you to go in and set your watermark. So I could do copyright at Chad Thompson. You can change the fonts, and you can do different things like that. As far as the effects, you can change that down to about 30%. Create, okay, and we'll show you that in just a moment. Personally, I don't put watermarks on my images. I think they look kind of unprofessional, and if people are going to steal your images, they're going to get stolen, but it happens. People can get rid of those watermarks, just trust me on that. So the next part is just go ahead and click Export, and you're going to see up here in the top left-hand corner, it's actually exporting our image. The image has been exported, so now it should be on our desktop in our folder, Lightroom Tutorial. So let's click on that folder, and then I'm going to hit spacebar to pump up this image, and there we go. There's our image that we just exported. You can see my watermark is down here in the bottom corner, and everything looks great. So that's pretty much it, guys. That's pretty much all you got to do, and you just go back and repeat the process over and over. But if you have any questions, leave those down below. I will be uploading tons more videos on Lightroom, getting more specific with different sections of Lightroom, the different sliders, what different things do, and to kind of explain things in more detail. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to leave a thumbs up. Go ahead and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. That's pretty much going to do it for today. And as always, be sure to create something new today.